Find your way to the real America. Leave your big cities with their urban problems. Drive along the highways, then off of them into God's country, up into the rolling Appalachian Mountains to these highlands of West Virginia. And then find a surprise. The town dump. Burning one moment, smoldering the next. A reminder that ugliness can be anywhere, everywhere people are. Or drive through North Carolina and watch as this city of 100,000 burns its waste. Or visit the redwood country of Northern California as a lady disposes of her garbage. In New York State, an open dump. There are thousands of them in the United States. More of man's cast-offs clutter the western desert. Open dumping is a health hazard. The Environmental Protection Agency of the federal government has organized a campaign called Mission 5000. The purpose, to improve the quality of our environment by eliminating 5,000 of America's dumps in an effective 2-year project, soliciting the assistance and cooperation of thousands of local communities. A typical American dump. It's located near Glen Burnie, Maryland, just outside Baltimore, in Anne Arundel County. Until recently, the average American has accepted the cheapest and easiest means of disposal, usually simply a dump. Today, the mood has changed. The public demands a better environment. New systems must be devised to control the quantity and characteristics of wastes and provide efficient collection, creative recycling of materials which can be reused, and proper disposal of the residue. Established programs must change to provide these improvements. More discards arrive. But look, the dump has been converted into a sanitary landfill. Maryland recently passed a law requiring all counties to develop a comprehensive plan for solid waste management. Because of its previous poor performance, Anne Arundel County was the first to be cited. They chose to convert the dump into a properly operated landfill, where refuse is compacted and covered continuously. The credit goes to the Maryland legislature, the state health department, and officials of Anne Arundel County. Incidentally, if the county had failed to cooperate, the new state law contained a hard-nosed provision which would have permitted the state to do the job and bill the county. Most states do not effectively regulate open dumping or open burning of solid wastes. Here at a recent meeting of the Minnesota State Pollution Control Board at St. Paul, officials are implementing a new anti-burning law. This was D-Day, Dump Day, before the Pollution Control Board. After D-Day, communities could no longer burn refuse in the open. The discussion focused on what scores of counties and hundreds of towns and cities would do. The flow of solid wastes would continue. Each community would have to devise a plan and put it into effect. In many instances, hiring specialized personnel, buying land and equipment, and increasing taxes, or establishing new special service charges for waste disposal. The board set procedures to be followed and sent them to all communities. Most states have not yet moved this far. Moultrie, Georgia is famous for its tobacco, cattle, hogs, poultry, cotton, peanuts, corn, pecans, watermelon, and dump. But Moultrie's dump is being eliminated. 2 petitions from local residents caused the Georgia Department of Public Health to place the city under orders to cease and desist within 30 days. The city has known for several years that eventually it would have to develop a better system, but repeatedly failed to take action. The 30-day notice is finally forcing action, but also introducing complications because of the short time allowed. Moultrie decided that a sanitary landfill was the most practical and economical alternative available. After evaluating several possible sites, this 100-acre tract was chosen. It is quite close to the city and has no drainage problems. Moultrie's buying it, will install access roads, and will eventually move the city's shops and garage to this location to centralize public works operations. But the old dump is going to be difficult to close because it is infested with rats. If the daily supply of garbage were simply cut off, they would leave searching for food and might invade nearby homes. Therefore, the local health department will undertake a systematic rat poisoning project at the old dump before the new landfill is opened. Then the piles of refuse and ashes will be compacted and covered with earth. Meanwhile, the trash is getting higher and higher. Moultrie is under orders, orders that are difficult to obey quickly. As Mission 5000 encourages thousands of communities to eliminate their dumps, the communities may encounter a variety of problems. Let's consider a few typical ones. Here, a small town is contracted with a local private operator to run its landfill. He has plenty of equipment and personnel, but the techniques are new to him, so he doesn't know exactly what he should be doing. He's careless in grading to handle runoff water and causes water pollution. He uses insufficient earth cover and litters the surrounding area. It takes a knowledgeable operator to run a good landfill. Meanwhile, a nearby community, which has been dumping and burning for years, has decided to clean up. It will start its new landfill on the same site as the dump. The city fathers naively believe that if you dump garbage in a hole and cover it, you have a sanitary landfill. So far, no detailed plan has been drafted, no equipment purchased, and the mayor is still quite vague about just how to do it. Raleigh, North Carolina will never be called a Mission 5000 success story because this city of over 100,000 people has been operating a sanitary landfill for 6 years. Here, too, some practical problems. Dust and a sandy soil, which is not ideal for cover material. Raleigh's landfill is located close to the central city and adjacent to a new freeway. The fill will bring a low area up to grade with a highway and will be made into a park when completed. Now the case of a community that went only halfway. This city of 30,000 people obviously has an excellent sanitary landfill, good equipment, skilled personnel, adequate cover material, and plenty of space. But only part of the city's solid wastes are being landfilled. The officials just can't bring themselves to bury the big stuff. Material that burns easily, tree limbs, leaves, and furniture, and big items such as refrigerators are still being hauled to the old dump. So the city has all the expense of a sanitary landfill and most of the nuisances of a burning dump. It's a state of mind, a habit. The city hasn't yet accepted the concept that it needs a total disposal system. This old dump has been closed and covered. In attempting to establish a new facility, the community could have requested advice from the state solid waste officer or the regional representative of the Solid Waste Management Office of the Environmental Protection Agency. Instead, they did it on their own, opened a landfill, which is really little better than the old dump. Cover is applied only when somebody gets around to it. State or federal engineers would have made recommendations on equipment and procedures, perhaps arranging for operator training to get the project off to a good start. If Mission 5000 is going to be a success, 5,000 communities will have to get organized. Heflin, Alabama already has. This huge tract is the site of an old burning dump, now eliminated and covered. Today, Heflin and Cleburne County have undertaken an area-wide effort by starting a sanitary landfill. Jointly, they bought equipment. The county hired an operator who admitted he didn't know a landfill from a hole in the ground. But he quickly learned the basic tricks of the trade: a small landfill face, proper compaction of the waste, daily complete cover, no waste motion. The state solid waste officer calls him a jewel. Next, the county will start a container collection system, which promises to reduce roadside dumping and allow small rural dumps to be eliminated. Nearby, Troy, Alabama has closed its out-of-town dump and is filling this huge gully only 4 blocks from City Hall. It used to be called Buzzard's Roost and was 40 feet deep. The key personality here is a city councilman who is a civil engineer by profession. When Interstate 75 was built through Adel, Georgia, the contractors purchased rights to strip material from nearby property. As a result, this 20-acre gravel pit was left in the middle of an industrial park. Adel's investigation showed that the pit was a good landfill site. It took less than 4 months to put it into operation. Water pollution may result when drainage from open dumps reaches surface streams or groundwater supplies. Here, a new landfill is being constructed in an area where geological studies indicated that surface water would leach through the buried refuse and carry pollutants into the groundwater. The solution is to install an adequate drainage system to bypass surface water safely. Solid waste landfilling is an engineering project requiring careful design. If you think that landfill techniques are restricted to the sunny South, think again. It is the accepted method in the colder sections of the country also. Solid wastes are collected in all weather and must be disposed of in the rain, snow, and even during periods when intense cold makes it uncomfortable for operators and freezes the surface of the ground. Mobile, Alabama once had one of the worst dumps in the country. Mobile now has a sanitary landfill which handles 400 tons a day. The cost is about $1 a ton, including amortization of equipment. But $1 a ton is infinitely greater than nothing per ton, and the city budget is feeling the pinch. Officials are reluctant to impose a special refuse disposal tax, even though this is standard practice elsewhere. They have increased charges to private operators who pay fees to use the site. Here, a private operator is seeking approval to open his own landfill to serve his commercial customers. He has obtained land use rights and needs only official sanction to start operating. The result of this conference was that he can operate only if he lines the bottom of the pit with compacted clay to prevent pollutants from oozing through to the sand below. Public and private operations can be successfully coordinated. The choice of whether a community wants to do its own solid waste collection and disposal or contract it out is an economic and political question, not a technical one. Lawton, Oklahoma, one of the first Mission 5000 success stories. May there be thousands of them. Lawton last year. The people were starting to object. The Comanche County Sanitarian was critical. The Oklahoma Solid Waste Chief indicated that action was overdue. The Environmental Protection Agency regional representative in Dallas suggested corrective action. The pressure was beginning to build. But Lawton might have just drifted on for years if the Oklahoma legislature hadn't stepped in. It passed a law prohibiting open burning by cities of over 10,000 population by January 1st, 1971. Lawton was put on notice. Members of the city council started to look at other landfill operations, investigated possible sites, and authorized the city attorney to obtain land purchase options. Lawton today. Dump closed. On January 19th, just 19 days late, burning finally ceased. They would have made the deadline except for a few problems which had to be solved systematically. The city council considered 6 landfill sites and held public hearings to select the best. Numerous nearby residents vigorously objected to having a dump near them. The sanitarian satisfied some of the objections by establishing landfill specifications and operating procedures, a fence, and beautification. Finally, this site was selected. It is 2 miles south of the city limits and is centrally located in the county. Other problems? Equipment was not delivered on time. Good operators were hard to find. But today, the Lawton Sanitary Landfill, second in the state of Oklahoma, is operating well. The site is expected to last 12 to 14 years. After completion, it may be converted into an industrial or recreational park. Yes, Lawton did it. Made a quick switch from an obnoxious burning dump to a sound system of solid waste management. Thousands of communities throughout America have a comparable problem. With today's increased emphasis on the environment, each town, city, and county will have to face up to its true responsibility to be a good housekeeper. In just 2 years, Mission 5000 should eliminate most of America's open dumps. The ultimate goal of the Environmental Protection Agency is to provide all Americans with acceptable solid waste systems. It sounds easy, but actually it requires hard work and money. You pay for a clean environment with your energy and your dollars. But the question is, can we really close those dumps? It depends on local leadership, not just officials, but the citizens themselves. Mission 5000 is a now thing. Look around at your environment. It's later than you think.
Happy 5,000. Uh-oh. What's going on? Everything's freaking out. Woo! Where am I? Hi, everybody. I'm Skip Alsheimer. Welcome to the AV Geeks lunchtime streaming show, where we watch old 16mm films, and we've been doing it for 4 years, and that was our 5,000th film. Now, technically, it's probably not our 5,000th film, but the way we're listing things, it's our 5,000th film. So there's certainly, we've shown more or less, we've duplicated, we've shown videos, but we're just calling this the 5,000th film. And we've shown 5,000 dumps 4 years ago, but I just wanted to show it again because I showed it early on in the streaming show history, and there's more faces and there's new people watching. And also, this film features Raleigh, North Carolina, although they called it Raleigh, North Carolina. And he also said desist, so cease and desist. And so, yeah, 5,000 films. There was another film that I had called 5,000 Brains that I couldn't find, and I'm thinking that it probably got moved to one of the 4 storage units. Wait, now there's 5 storage units. I just got another one today. So I got a good deal on it, so I'm excited about that. But yeah, so when I watched this film, I was like, wow, there was a dump like near downtown Raleigh where you could actually see the buildings downtown. Holy cow, where is that? And I guessed where it was, and I was wrong. But it was kind of near Dorothea Dix, which was the state mental hospital, and near the School for the Blind, and near Mission Valley, which was owned by Catholics. And I kind of posted to one of these old Raleigh Facebook groups, and people were talking about it, and they said that, oh, it stank. There were seagulls there all the time. The smell of smoke was bad. Depending on how the wind went, there'd be flies. It was gross. So it's not there anymore. They moved the dumps to the periphery of the city, and they're now sanitary landfills. So there you go. All right. Thanks for joining us. Thank you for the payment, Rick K. Rick has been supporting us not only financially, but he also helps do the comments administration. So if somebody goes crazy and starts a tirade or goes down a path that is not the way that we want things to go in the comments, he helps mediate that. So thank you. It is a thankless task. All right. Speaking of digging, let's dig into our past. Archaeology.
These students are part of an archaeology workshop. They found a rock, actually an ancient tool. They've discovered it near St. Louis, Missouri, not far from where the Illinois and Mississippi rivers join, the home of an Indian culture which flourished 1,500 years before Columbus arrived in America. The land is rich in natural resources. The bluffs that protected the Indians from cold winter winds were covered with nut trees. These people are a mystery to us, for they left no books or written records of any kind. They wrote nothing down about their hunting, their games, their gods, or their laws. However, these Indians left behind many physical clues that tell us something of their lives. These objects, called artifacts, provide the only information the archaeologist has to work with.
Look what I found. What is it? What is it? Do you know what culture it could be from?
Yeah, this is a hammerstone. You can tell by looking at the pecking here on the edge. They were using this to pound something.
What would you use that?
Well, you could grind nuts with it, or corn, or something like that by smashing them up on another rock.
It's from artifacts like this one that the archaeologist will attempt to piece together the lives of these unknown people. The first step in archaeology is the surface pickup. With the cooperation of a local farmer, these students carefully search between rows of soybeans for artifacts. Now remember that everything counts. What's found on the surface gives an idea of what's underneath. The results of the surface pickup are plotted on a map.
Well, what do you think?
We seem to find a lot of artifacts right in there.
Well, then why don't we open up our excavations there?
We start excavating with shovels, and in case we hit anything, we have trowels ready to pick them up.
We take the dirt and we throw it onto a screen and screen all the dirt through, taking out the materials that we get, such as bone, pottery, or any artifacts that we might have missed.
Archaeology is teamwork. Everyone works closely with the chief archaeologist to excavate and sort out the material. On the field, it's difficult to tell exactly what an artifact is. Artifacts are usually well disguised under layers of dirt. But after some washing, the patterns, styles, and designs become clear. Now these artifacts can be correctly sorted and properly analyzed.
You might think it's kind of weird to be using a paintbrush to clean a piece of pottery, but if you use a scrub brush like she's using on a piece of chert, well, you'll take away all your markings here. And you have to leave the markings so the lab can define and see whether it's middle woodland or late woodland pottery.
Each culture seemed to have distinctive ways of manufacturing pottery and distinctive ways of decorating their pottery. So if we find a sherd or a piece of pottery with a particular decoration or a particular shape or style, we can say what group of people or what culture made that piece of pottery.
For microscopic studies of the pots that we find at the sites, it looks like what they were doing is rolling their clay into long, thin strips or coils, and then wrapping these coils around in circular forms to make their pots.
A culture is a group of people who leave behind things with a certain set of characteristics.
The clay before you add a little bit more.
Culture does not change with a bang. Culture changes in gradual processes.
This pot gives us a clue to trade networks in prehistoric times. By analyzing this pot, which we were able to glue back together, we can determine where the clay which made the pot came from. And we sent some of the clay to a chemist, and he told us that the clay that made this pot came from Wisconsin. So either the clay itself or the finished pot was traded all the way down here from Wisconsin.
By working with the chemist, we were able to say more about the pot than just an archaeologist working alone would have been able to say.
Pat and I were given this square, and each square is 5 by 5 feet long, and so there's plenty of room for each of us to dig in.
You use a trowel when you're hitting a different color soil, which is midden, where it's been like that for thousands of years since, the Indians left it that way.
Brett, look what I found. Hey, put it back. Why, you got a piece plaque?
Sometimes if you found something important, you would plot it, piece plot it, and you could be able to put in it's exact to the inch.
You dig only 3 inches at a time, and this is called a level.
A level is a way of us measuring where we found artifacts or whatever we found.
I didn't expect any writing at all, or hardly any.
Archaeologists are constantly asking themselves 2 questions. Where is it, and why is it there? The where may help answer the why.
Hey, look at how much darker the soil is in there.
Anytime these ancient Indians dug a hole, the hole eventually refilled with soil that was different in color from the surrounding soil. We call these refilled holes features.
We started to dig the feature with trowels, and we found some burnt charcoal and burnt limestone and a scattering of bone and bits of things that look like seeds.
And other things that would have resulted from a fire or fire pit.
This fireplace answers some of the questions about what the people were eating.
I see you have a piece of charcoal there.
And how they were gathering their
You might
food.
want to save that for a carbon-14 date. We can tell the age of this pit by dating the carbon in that wood charcoal.
Well, what about this? Can you carbon date that?
This projectile point isn't an organic material. It's a stone object, and stone has no carbon in it. So we wouldn't be able to use a carbon-14 dating like we can on that wood charcoal. But we can take it to the stone artifact lab, and the analyst there can tell us how old this is by the style of the point.
What you got?
We have a projectile point we found in our feature today. Steve said we could date the site through something like this. How would that be done?
Well, let's see. We can't always tell from a single artifact how old it is, but we have other artifacts to go by. Along with these points, the deep side notches and the convex base, we have these polyhedral cores, and we also have these nice parallel-sided flakes, all of which date to about 2,000 years ago.
What would these tools have been used for?
We call these things lamellar flakes. We think they're various types of knives, maybe for leather cutting. You just take the flake and the leather and just start cutting. And it cuts fairly well. Leather's pretty tough. Just like that.
The carbon-14 lab confirmed the findings from the stone artifacts lab that our fireplace was used between 100 BC and 50 AD. From the pottery lab, we discovered that the people were the Hopewells. From the flint skinning knife, it appears that these people prepared the meat near the fire that would later cook it. They had abundance of foods to choose from. Which did they use and why? Many of these items are so small that they can't be collected in the shovel or the trowel or even the table screen. So we have to have developed a new technique, a process called flotation. Lift the basket up higher, higher. There you go. Now jump it. Okay. There you go. So I'll swish through here. Now we're going to want to get the heavy remains off the bottom. So I want you to put all the dirt down in this one corner. And we'll recover such tiny remains as carbonized seeds, nuts, fish scales, fish bones, as well as burnt clay objects, pottery, and chert flakes. Okay, that's real good. Now you can empty your
By
bucket
studying
out.
these plant remains, the botanist has an idea of what the people were eating.
The plants they use the most would be the nuts, like hickory nuts and acorns and black walnuts and pecans.
The Illinois River Valley was rich in natural weed crops. Because they were easily harvested and provided a ready source of food, we suspect that these people did not need to use agriculture.
Okay, Richard, we can see here the sample that we just took out of the water. After it's dried, we'll be able to separate it then into these other 2 samples by using a chemical process. In this charcoal sample, we'll find such things as nutshells and wood fragments. And then the heavier sample, such things as bone, will be left behind, as well as small chert flakes and pieces of clay blobs.
What's this? It's bone, isn't it?
Yes, this looks like a fish bone.
Bonnie, I found this bone out doing flotation with Steve Noble, and he said it was a fish bone, but he couldn't tell me what kind. Could you tell me what kind it is?
Right, that's a fish vertebra. From the vertebra, it's really hard to figure out exactly which kind of fish it is because they're all very similar.
Do you know how big the fish was?
Yeah, you can estimate the size just by comparing it with modern fish. And one thing that we've learned by doing this is that the people were eating fish of a real wide size range, from 3 inches to about 48 inches in size. By studying the bones from the hearts at the site, we get a pretty good idea of what the people ate and what their diet was like in general. And thus far we know that most of the meat came from white-tailed deer and from the different kinds of fish.
Here, look at that. The color has changed again.
You've hit the sterile layer. If you go down any deeper, you won't find any more evidences of debris that man left behind.
Just this one feature has told us a lot about this culture. Features are considered the building blocks of archaeology.
By looking at how this feature relates to the feature next door to it, to the feature that is 100 feet away from it, we can then begin to piece together something about the structure of his village, how he was organizing his space.
The archaeologist will always make sure that there is enough material gathered to avoid stepping out on a limb, using too little information and drawing assumptions from it. For this reason, archaeologists have to open up and excavate large areas. The Coster site, only a mile away from where the students are digging, is an example of this. The Coster site was begun a number of years ago using the same methods and techniques. This kind of excavation gives us a more complete picture. It shows the full range of what the people were doing.
You know, I'm often asked why we tackle a site like Coster, a big hole like this with many levels. 14 villages covering over 8,000 years of human life. It's in a site like this that we can actually see why these ancient civilizations rose and decayed. Perhaps getting some clues that will help us live better today. Basically, we're looking for clues to help solve our own problems. And you've got to look at ancient culture over many, many long time periods before you can do that. What were these people like? They were very much like you and I. They belonged to the same species as you and I. And if one of these people walked downtown Chicago, you would say, there goes an American Indian. And yet they lived here 400 generations ago. They're the same people as you and I. And in fact, what we're looking at is you and I, in a sense, thousands of years ago. And therefore, we're looking at our own history.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Let's see, so many comments here. So many comments. Yeah, you know, we just saw that film about dumps, and now we are watching a film about digging up dumps to try to piece together how our past was. So it's kind of interesting. Let's see, what do we got coming up? I have another film on the scanner, and this is a film we have not seen. It's called Foolish Brother. Enjoy.
I'm the storyteller, and my stories must be told. I have many stories, tales for both the young and old. I have many voices to describe many places. Many names have I, and many faces. In Russia I am Ivan, in Sweden I am Jan. In Germany I'm Johann, in America I'm John. From my many travels I have gathered these tales to teach you good sense when all else fails. Sometimes there are tears, sometimes there is laughter, but always are happily ever after.
Long ago and far away on the edge of a village, there stood a tumble-down old house. Two brothers lived here. Suleiman, the eldest, was very clever and quick-witted, not at all like his younger brother, Abdul. Suleiman would shake his head in despair, for Abdul was such a foolish boy. One day, Suleiman found him walking around outside holding a stick above his head. When Suleiman asked him why he was doing this, Abdul replied that he was propping up the sky so it wouldn't fall on his head. Another day, when it began to rain heavily, Abdul rushed out into the field with a pot and tried to catch all the rainwater so he wouldn't drown. And it did not matter how much Suleiman explained things to his foolish brother, Abdul always got everything wrong. Now Suleiman and Abdul's father had just died, and all he had left to his sons was the tumble-down house and a donkey. Suleiman would have liked to go off and seek his fortune, but he had promised his father that he would take care of Abdul. So in order to earn a living, Abdul would leave the house each morning, taking with him an axe. He would load up the donkey and then set out to collect firewood from the nearby forest. Of course, Abdul managed to do everything wrong as usual, and it was only because the donkey was clever and knew exactly where to go that they ever arrived in the forest at all. The donkey even knew where to stop, and then Abdul would dismount, take up his axe and go and look for fallen branches of wood. These he would chop up into logs and bring back to his brother Suleiman, who would sell them to the villagers. However, Abdul had terrible trouble with the logs. He often had to speak to them most severely, because they would not lie down quietly for him and let him chop them up. Sometimes he even had to smack them. Suleiman stayed at home and organized selling the wood. He dare not let Abdul do it, for he always got it wrong and offended their best customers. They were so poor they needed every penny. As it was, Abdul tried Suleiman's patience most sorely, and he had to control his temper greatly, not to give his foolish brother a good hiding. One day, as Abdul was about to leave the forest with his load of wood, the wind began to blow very hard, and the tree Abdul was passing began to creak and groan. As the tree rattled and shook its leaves in Abdul's face, he started back in fright. Oh dear, thought Abdul. The tree is angry and trying to frighten my poor donkey and me. I must do something. So he ran up to the tree and shouted, "Stop that, you bad tree! Stop frightening me!" But the wind just blew harder and the tree kept creaking and groaning, and Abdul got in a terrible state. He took his axe and he hit the tree, and out came a shower of golden coins. Abdul was quite overcome. What a strange tree this was. First it frightened him, and now it showered him with gifts. He'd better take this gold home to Suleiman, or he would never believe what had happened and would box his ears for telling such lies. But the coins kept running away. He must catch them, quick. Then Abdul had the cleverest thought of his life. He went over to the donkey, and taking off the sack, he took it back to where the gold coins now lay on the grass. Quickly, he filled it up. Abdul returned home in great excitement. Wouldn't Suleiman be pleased with him for being so clever? He had captured all those gold coins. Abdul was so excited, he chattered on about how he had hit a bad tree because it had frightened him, and how the tree had felt so sorry it had given him a present. Suleiman didn't understand one word Abdul was saying, and was very annoyed that he had returned home without any wood. Then Abdul said gold coins, and Suleiman, disbelieving, went over to the donkey and saw at last what Abdul was talking about. Suleiman thought quickly. They must take the gold inside before any of the villagers saw it. So the two brothers quickly took the sack of gold into the house. Suleiman was very nervous about anyone seeing the gold, for the village was full of gossips and the countryside was full of brigands. You just couldn't be too careful. So Suleiman said to his brother, "Listen, Abdul, if you give me half this gold, I will look after it all. You're so stupid, you're bound to get robbed." Abdul was quite happy to give Suleiman all the gold, for he did not know what to do with it. "Go quickly to the storekeeper and ask if you can borrow his scales," said Suleiman. "If he asks you what you are weighing, you are not weighing gold. Is that understood? We must keep it a secret." Abdul smiled, for he thought this was a wonderful game, and he was happy that Suleiman was in such a good humor. Away went Abdul through the village. There was a market in the main square where the storekeeper sold his wares, but since it was getting late, he would have no great need of his scales now. Now, the storekeeper happened to be a very nosy man, so when Abdul asked him if he could borrow his scales, the storekeeper immediately became suspicious. "Why do you want them?" he asked slyly. Abdul thought hard, then he remembered. "Well, we don't want it to weigh gold, for sure," smiled Abdul. The storekeeper's ears pricked up immediately when he heard the word gold. How interesting, he thought. And slyly he dipped his finger into a pot of oil at his side. Abdul did not notice the storekeeper press his oily finger against the inside of the scale pan. Then he handed the scales to an eager Abdul, who hurried away, leaving the storekeeper to ponder about what the brothers were up to. Abdul returned home with the scales, delighted that he had managed to keep the secret and not to tell the storekeeper about the gold. Suleiman was waiting impatiently for Abdul. He quickly took the scales from his brother and hung them up. Then Suleiman carefully filled the pans with coins. He made sure that they were both the same weight before tipping them out into 2 different sacks. He continued to do this until he had weighed out all the gold. Abdul returned to the market and handed back the scales. No sooner had Abdul gone than the storekeeper quickly looked at the bottom of the pan on which he had pressed the oil, and there, sure enough, he saw sticking to it a gold coin. Thought the storekeeper, so they were weighing out gold. They must have a great fortune. And being the biggest gossip in the village, away he hurried to tell everyone about the brothers' newfound fortune. No, it wasn't a secret for long. Soon the whole village was talking about it. The brothers could not go anywhere without people whispering and pointing at them. Look at the brothers, they'd whisper. They have so much gold, they have to weigh it out. Suleiman was very cross, for he was sure Abdul must have told the storekeeper, although Abdul kept insisting he hadn't. But it was too late now. There was only one thing left to do. Suleiman decided that since news of their fortune was bound to be spread abroad, it would not be long before brigands heard about it and came to their house to steal the gold. The only thing the brothers could do was bury the gold somewhere safe and leave the village until all the fuss had died down. Neither of the brothers wanted to go, but the brigands were very fierce and dangerous men, and they were too scared to stay and fight them. So they buried their gold in a ditch behind the house and covered the hole with heavy stones. Then they prepared to leave. It was early morning and none of the villagers had stirred from their houses yet. The brothers decided to travel south and see if they could find work in a large town on the other side of the forest. They dare not take any gold with them in case it aroused suspicion. Suleiman felt a little ashamed of running away like this, but Abdul thought it was a wonderful adventure. So off they trotted on their faithful old donkey. They had not ridden far into the forest when Suleiman suddenly remembered something very important. Abdul, please return to the house immediately. I forgot to shut the door. Go back and shut it. I will wait here. Abdul didn't want to go back to the village alone, but Suleiman insisted. After all, it was Abdul's fault they had to leave home in the first place. So Abdul returned to the village alone. Suleiman prepared to wait. At least this time he wouldn't have to worry. Abdul must be able to shut the door without getting confused. He hoped his brother would be quick, for he feared the brigands might already be on their way through the forest to steal the gold. Suleiman waited. Abdul seemed to be taking rather a long time to shut the door. What could he be up to? He was probably gossiping with the villagers again. Oh dear, thought Suleiman. I hope he won't tell them where we buried the gold. Then a very strange sight appeared. Suleiman turned in disbelief to see Abdul coming down the road, balancing the door on his head. This was too much. Suleiman groaned. Why had he been afflicted with such a stupid brother? "What are you doing, you fool?" yelled Suleiman as Abdul hurried towards him. "I told you to go home and shut the door. I didn't tell you to bring it with you." Foolish Abdul had thought Suleiman would have been very pleased with his idea for bringing the door. "Why did you bring it? Why?" groaned Suleiman. "I thought if the door wasn't there, nobody could go through it," explained Abdul brightly. "So I brought it with me." Poor Suleiman gritted his teeth, for he had had more than enough of his stupid brother. But it was too late to go back and replace the door now. They must hurry, for Suleiman wanted to be as far as possible from the village by nightfall. So they set off once more, Suleiman riding on the donkey, while Abdul trudged along behind, whistling as he went. Abdul refused to be parted from the door, for he thought it might come in very useful if they had to get in somewhere. Suleiman said nothing, for he feared he might lose his temper if he did. On and on marched the brothers, and soon they had left their village far behind. They came at last to a rockier part of the countryside. Suleiman would stop for nothing, even though Abdul by now was beginning to find the door quite a load. Suleiman kept a lookout, for one never knew if wicked brigands were waiting in the bushes to pounce on them as they passed. Through the afternoon they kept travelling on. Suleiman knew that Abdul was tiring, but still he would not stop. It was all Abdul's fault they were in this mess. They were just entering a small wood as darkness fell. "I hope we can stop soon," thought Abdul wistfully. Suddenly, Suleiman heard something which made him stop dead in his tracks. There came the sound of horses pounding towards them. Someone was travelling at great speed. Suleiman did not waste a second. He dismounted from his donkey and led it into the thicket. Louder and louder pounded the horses' hooves as closer they came. Suleiman could hear that it wasn't a lone horseman, but several travelling at great speed. He half dragged Abdul towards a large tree. They must hide quickly, for Suleiman guessed it was brigands coming, and he had no wish to get caught. He was right. It was indeed brigands that came galloping down the road. Suleiman scrambled up into the tree. "Hurry, brother," whispered Suleiman urgently. "Please hurry, the brigands are coming." But Abdul would not leave the door behind, for he feared that the brigands might open it. Suleiman had to agree, since if the brigands saw a door in the middle of the forest, they might wonder. But hurry they must. Suleiman pulled at the door frantically as it kept getting stuck in the branches. The brothers were very, very frightened. Would they be caught? Closer and closer came the sound of those hooves as Suleiman pulled Abdul up into the tree. it wasn't a moment too soon. Abdul's feet disappeared among the leaves just as the first brigand arrived. "Whoa!" cried the brigand leader to the other two men. "Let's stop and make camp here for the night." They stopped right underneath the tree where the brothers were hiding. "Hush! Don't move," hissed Suleiman. They watched the three brigands tie up their horses. They looked so wicked and fierce, the brothers shivered. "We'll be in the village by morning," chuckled the leader, as they settled round a fire and brewed up their coffee. They were tired, for they had ridden hard all day. Now, when Suleiman heard the word village, he knew they must mean his village. They had heard about his gold. They must keep quiet until the brigands fell asleep. It wasn't long before the brigands stretched themselves out on the ground and began to nod off. When Abdul saw this, it made him feel very tired. He yawned and dropped the door. Down it fell on the brigands. Up they jumped in panic. Now, these brigands were some of the fiercest in the land, and they would fight any man or beast, but they had never ever seen a door fall from the sky before. Away they ran to their horses and sped off down the road the way they had come, swearing that they would never return to this accursed region again. Suleiman and Abdul laughed and laughed. The next morning they returned happily home, for they knew the brigands would spread the news of the falling door and tell the other robbers to keep away. As soon as they returned to the house, they quickly dug up their fortune. They were delighted, for now they could repair the house and buy some new clothes. And this is exactly what they did. Suleiman bought himself and Abdul a fine new outfit. Suleiman also found himself a pretty young wife, of whom he was very proud. Abdul was delighted, for Suleiman found him a wife too. She kept a sharp eye on him and made sure that he didn't get into too much trouble. For Abdul's foolishness didn't disappear with his newfound fortune. He still got everything wrong. But now they were wealthy, it didn't matter quite so much. Yes, there was no doubt about it, thought Suleiman. Being foolish can be very useful sometimes.
Alright, so it says here about the series. Children have always loved to listen to a story. In our series, Storybook International, we use folk tales to amuse and entertain while quietly teaching the lesson of life. As the stories are seen and heard, the viewers will become aware of the many different cultures and customs of the world. Storybook International is a rewarding, enjoyable, richly varied series filled entirely on locations around the world that both children and adults will enjoy. Hemisphere Productions, huh? There you go. I was reading from inside the can, so sometimes there's notes. But thanks for joining us today. Wow, today was epic. 5,000th film. And then a bunch of other films. I hope everybody has a great weekend. We'll be back again on Monday to watch more films. Also, we've been adding films on YouTube. Some things that we've shown on the show with some color correction and some tweaking, and some new stuff that you haven't seen yet. So one way you can support us, besides hitting the like and the subscribe button, is to go watch these other videos that we posted online. Also, you can donate by using the Super Thanks button, which a couple of you did, so thank you so much for that, Jim and Rick K, and then who else? I can't remember. I'm missing somebody, and I apologize for that. You can also go to ko-fi.com/avgeeks or patreon.com/avgeeks. Those are great ways to support us. And yeah, so we will see you Monday, if I don't see you before. Everybody have a great weekend. I hope the pollen's not getting you down. Hopefully some rain's going to come through and it's going to wash away some of that pollen because it is killing me. But everybody have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.